Okay, well, my watch is showing it's 3 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. There may be some others join us here in a little while. I don't think this meeting shouldn't take more than an hour, really. It's kind of a little bit more narrowly focused than the previous committee meeting that we had, which is a little more broad. Not really looking at the project that's being proposed today, really. We're looking at the more macro issue of the mixed-use town center, land use designation, and both the map and the text that's associated with that. So let me go through just reviewing some of the objectives for our meeting today. We'll again go back through the map and the text of the MUTC, which we've already done that a fair amount up to now. And then we'll talk a little bit more, follow up on a discussion that we had in our previous meeting on whether y'all have any suggestions on map or text modifications. And really a bigger question, whether the mixed-use town center should really be repurposed in light of whether a vertical mixed-use product is really marketable and doable, at least in the short term in our community. Should mixed use be maybe horizontal, applied to be horizontal as an option? If somebody wants to do vertical, that's fine, but horizontal's probably, at least in the short term, the more marketable and likely product that we'll have, and that's what we've got proposed over at the Biddle Farms. And then just talking a little bit more about, we went through the text. It's just 2 pages in our land use plan that deals with the mixed use town center, and most of the components that's referenced in that, I think everybody felt that those were important components for a town center or this kind of central part of the town to try to build a place of identity in this general location at Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road. One of the things that was identified as maybe in need of revisiting is the high-density residential, substantial residential that's referenced in the current mixed-use town center, namely because it was there to have enough people living within a convenient walking distance of the idea was of a vertical mixed-use product that they could sustain the businesses and offices that may go in that town center development. And then if there's any other issues that you all want to talk about in relation to the mixed-use town center, then we could certainly do that. So just a refresher, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen here, at least on my screen. I had Carrie to add property lines for the properties in this general part of town. The purple area, of course, is our mixed-use town center as it's currently mapped. It doesn't follow property lines. It's more of just a general kind of raster-based image of this is kind of an area where a town center project or town center projects may be good candidates. We have one, obviously, that's being proposed over on the east side of Brooklawn in the Biddle Farm area. And then we also have a property that was actually rezoned to town center zoning district that is off of Kingston Pike, just to the east of the Admiral's Corner and the rural metro buildings there along Campbell Station Road. So there's different sections of the mixed-use town center. It includes Village Green Shopping Center, the Mayor Ford's property to the west, the Coles development, of course, the area around the town hall, and then over in West End Center area. So that's what we have currently. And you can see the surrounding land uses predominantly are the brown, and that's medium density residential. That was areas that were originally identified as good candidates for multifamily residential. And that goes back to the text of the MUTC that talks about having, a higher density residential within and immediately adjacent to the town center area. The text, as I said earlier, is really only 2 pages in our comprehensive land use plan. It's broken down into just a general overview of what we're trying to accomplish with the mixed-use town center. The main objective was to try to bring about a downtown, and that was strategy number 1 that was identified when we updated our land use plan in 2012. That lack of the town having its own identity, its own gathering space that people identify as being the heart of Farragut. No town square, no, kind of central gathering space that people would associate with Farragut. I mean, currently we're really a collection of more or less subdivisions and shopping centers. A lot of people associate Farragut with Turkey Creek development on Parkside Drive. And what we're trying to do with the mixed-use town center was to provide for a map of the area where this may be a good candidate, and then some text that would go along to describe, what are the key components and the kind of uses and the general built environment that we'd want to see in that area. And when we talked about the text last time, again, most of the things in there, the key elements, I think you all were okay with and felt like they would be important for a town center. But then there was that concern about additional, I guess, higher density residential in the purple area. So that's something we need to maybe talk through a little bit more to get your all's maybe more specific feedback on that, and whether and what kind of text modifications we may want to propose. Ultimately, it would need to be part of a public workshop, and then ultimately go to the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, since the board has actually adopted the mixed-use town center portion of our plan. So you can see, again, this is page 2 in the plan, the text, the general character that we're after. It's kind of a pedestrian-oriented environment with buildings brought up closer to the street. Really, what it talks about is connected buildings, which the building at the Biddle Farms, those would not be connected. They would be smaller, kind of horizontal mixed use, I guess. And they would not be like what you see on the screen there in a more traditional vertical mixed use type project. But, again, looking at placemaking, what makes an area a place? Why is Cherokee Boulevard and Sequoia Hills a place? What are its characteristics that make it, a destination? People want to go there. They want to hang out there. Why is that? What does it have that makes it special? That's really what I think the objective is to try to create in the town, is that kind of place. And there's different, I think, ways and approaches within which we could do that, and have provisions that would be, doable and marketable, given our size and our proximity to a more urban area like downtown Knoxville. So some of the general discussion items that we can open this up for your all's input. But again, just talking through what do we mean by the term mixed use, the phrase mixed use. Do we want to repurpose that? We want to relook at that in relation to our plan? And if so, in what fashion? We want to still provide for mixed use. If somebody wants to do a vertical mixed use, that's great. They can do it. Maybe we look at dividing up the mixed use town center land use area into areas where that might be a candidate and where it may not be because of higher density residential that might be associated with the vertical mixed use building. Or do we want to just kind of look for, providing for horizontal mixed use and just focus more on the form of buildings and not really get as worked up about the uses, but really kind of, here's a vision of the buildings and the built environment that we'd like to see. And then you basically create a regulatory environment that matches that form, giving you some flexibility within the form. And then basically that's your guiding principles for how it gets built. People have a plan with, the form established, and they just have to build it. So that's an option that we could consider for this part of the town, and just really completely kind of restructure what a mixed-use town center is and how we may want to try to pragmatically bring it about. Dealing with the higher density, is an issue because, again, we are not in an area where the real estate is expensive enough to justify a parking garage for the most part. So when you have higher density residential and vertical mixed use, you create, even though it's a walkable environment, it's still going to be auto dependent in an area like ours. So you're going to have to provide for parking, and that takes up space. And ultimately, what that can create is a situation where the only way to achieve that is with a vertical garage. So that's been a challenge of trying to market the vertical mixed use product in our town at this point. So if we look at other residential products, what kind of residential do we see in different parts of our mixed use town center? Most of our mixed use town center land use is currently zoned commercial. We have a couple areas that on Mayor Ford's property, one small area that's zoned office, and then there's an area that's actually zoned residential. But most of the rest of it is either commercial or planned commercial. So residential is currently allowed in the mixed use town center overlay, but it's only allowed on the upper floors. So it's a true vertical mixed use building where that would be allowed. So with that, I kind of wanted to get your all's, that's kind of throwing a lot of information at you at one time, but I think just getting back to the original question, the big question, do we want to repurpose the mixed use town center? And if so, what are your all's thoughts, and what direction would you like to go in that regard?
Mark, I'm not sure if I have direction to add, but I will say this: as I'm looking at the old Kroger property, turn on my camera, and that development, I'm looking at that development as being the centerpiece now of and everything kind of, to me, that will be the most intense development we have. Mostly I'm concerned about what you said. Anything that we do, we're not going to have parking garages. It's doubtful that someone will build a parking garage in there. And then anything that we do with more dense housing would require parking lots. And we all know how wonderful parking lots are when we're trying to make a more walkable environment. So that pushes me towards whatever residential we have will be like single family detached or single family attached at denser levels. I could see townhomes, but they usually have parking in the back. That has to be a consideration of what we're envisioning for the rest of this area. Because having to put in massive parking lots everywhere to accommodate the vehicles will muddy up or ugly up what it is we're trying to accomplish here. So I don't have that magical solution, but I do look at this current project that we're doing as our town center as the most intense part of the rest of what goes along with it. And I guess that's kind of where I'm starting off from.
Yeah, this is John. This is John. I have a comment. I cheated. I went to the answer section of the handout here. The next slide has some suggestions which I really like. One of those is the suggestion that attached. Let me read it here. Where MUTC is abutting existing residential communities, for example, Park Place, Glen Abbey, Village Green, the density shall match the density of the adjacent residential areas. I like that. And then before that talks about if the density is getting greater than 8 units per acre. I think that fits with what you just said, Louise, in that it kind of limits, first of all, it kind of limits, and we don't have 4-story apartment buildings. And when we do get up around the 8, we're into duplexes for housing or housing that's a lot. And so that suggestion I like a lot from the next slide number 7, I guess it is. 6, 7, yeah, slide number 7.
This is Alderman Pinchuk. I've got a comment. I think Mark has stated that the parking is a big issue on the Biddle property, I guess mainly because of the floodplain. But Craig Allen's property, he had suggested not only, he suggested that he would have underground parking as well as parking on the surface. And I know it would be difficult to do in the Biddle property, but the project of Craig Allen's would have that additional parking needed with the underground parking to help not only with the residents there, but also with the commercial there. So I think that's something that needs to be thought about as we discuss this issue.
Yeah, I think when you have enough topography, enough grade change, that might be an option. His property does have a pretty good amount of fall on it from east to west. The Biddle Farm property, though, is relatively flat, so there really wouldn't be, and probably the water table is probably pretty high there too. They wouldn't really have an option for anything below grade. But I think Craig Allen's, if he could ever make the numbers work on that, he could kind of work that into the slope as part of his project with, less cost, because he's kind of working with the grade of the property. But yeah, one thing that John was talking about on this slide, there were some things that I'd proposed here, maybe ways of dealing with residential, if we want to keep it as an option in the mixed-use town center. And maybe it could be tied to the underlying zoning district or the immediately adjacent plan of development for different parts of the mixed-use town center. You may have the higher density up to only 8 units per acre if you have a base zone of commercial or PCD. Now that would have to be worked in with whatever we do with the PCD with the Biddle Farm project. But the idea is that you're putting the higher density residential, or giving that as an option in areas that don't abut existing residential communities and that are already zoned for a non-residential development. But that, raises the question of whether you even want that as an option up to 8 units per acre on parts of the town center that are zoned commercial. Do you want really nice prime commercial property to end up being attached single family or, townhomes along Kingston Pike? So that's something to think about.
Well, you also have to consider how much commercial can we support in that area? Certainly with what Bud Cullum's doing, that's going to bring, how much square foot of commercial is that, retail is that, David? Do you know off the top of your head?
This is all in the pinch. I think it's 62,000 or 64,000.
64,000. So you start wondering how much retail can we support in that area? And I understand what you're saying, Mark, and because we've seen a lot of good commercial property do something else on it that we're not happy about. But and those are market decisions that we tend to have to deal with anyway. I mean, we have Swan property is neighborhood convenience commercial, so it's a mix of residential. That's up to 8 units per acre. Now they've just kind of separated out the uses there. It's not really combined together, although there's a walkability that we're kind of hoping to embrace in the commercial area of it. I could certainly see that. But that's the problem, is developers won't, my understanding, especially out in the suburbs, developers aren't going to do a combined commercial residential type project. It doesn't seem to me that the funding for it is even set up to support that type of project. It would have to have 2 different developers in it, and that sounds complicated. Is that your impression, David, from what you've heard?
I think certainly over the last 10 years, I've spoken to a lot of developers about the mixed use concept here in Farragut and trying to get them to do the vertical mixed use. Out here in suburbia, it's a little bit more challenging. They're used to doing separate projects, maybe integrating them like we're talking about right now, horizontally, but not necessarily vertically. Don't know if that'll change in the future. Obviously, market conditions could change, 5-10 years down the road. That may be a more viable option. But right now, obviously, we have somebody that's come before us that's looking at that horizontal option. So I think the question for the commission is really, what do you want to do in the future with the rest of that land that we have designated? Do you want to just really focus more on the commercial side of things and then the residential side and figure out what's a good mix in those areas? But then maybe if you want to keep the vertical in case that does provide an option down the road, then it's still there for them if they see that being something they want to do.
I have to be honest, from talking to people, I'm not entirely sure there's energy for the vertical, meaning 3 and 4 stories in our town center. I mean, this is, I know that there's a handful of people that are, have already written in about this particular project. Obviously we're going to have community meetings and we'll get a better feel with that. But a lot of times when you have those community meetings, the people that are most upset about are the ones that show up and tell you don't do that. So it's hard to tell, do we have the ability to support 3 or 4 buildings, 3 or 4 stories in a vertical way? And then you just loop right back to the parking problem, and we're creating a parking lot. And that doesn't shout downtown feel either. So to me, it's really something I'm struggling through. I do see much of this, which is already zoned residential, to remain residential. I can see that, like Glen Abbey is R3 and Park Place is R4. Those are low density in our land use plan. We've moved R4 to, even though it's called medium density, it really is low density in our. It comes out to much less than 6 units per acre. So we've kind of got to look at the existing issues on the ground. Obviously, you can see I'm struggling with this.
This is Alderman Pinchot. I'd like to chime in here. I'm still looking for a vertical mixed-use town center project, whether it happens now or down the road or combination, whatever. But the Biddle project, in my opinion, has way too many apartments. The density of their apartments is too high, in my opinion. Instead of 280 units, I'd rather see that be like 220. I would like to see possibly that building that faces the commercial and faces the big lawn that we've been talking about, maybe converting that to condos. I've talked to people that are anxious for a mixed-use town center, but want to live in the mixed-use town center, but not rent. They want to buy. They want to take ownership. They want a condo or a loft or something as part of the option to a mixed-use town center. I just think 280 apartments is too much to start with. I sure wouldn't want to see any more than that. And that's why I want to make sure whatever we do, we create a zone for this that would not allow more apartments down the road. But I still contend we need some type of condo project added to this, and I can't see why possibly one of those buildings in the proposed concept plan couldn't be converted to condos. So that's my 2 cents.
That's Mayor Williams. All good points. Probably one of the best ones is the where you have existing residential that you normally we always have a buffer between that and commercial. So when you look at the Park Place, Glen Abbey, Village Green, you look at the property there, which is the Ford property. The front side of it is commercial. Your buffer would have to be something that would be a minimum of what they have, but it could be condos. It could be a mix of condos and single family. It'd certainly work real good as a buffer. When you get to the town center, again, what has been brought to us by Mr. Cullum and his group is a horizontal plan that they can sell. That's real important that they can sell that, and that you have financing in order to do these type of projects. So if that's what they can sell, then I'm not sure how we can really tell them that they need to do something different, because if they can't sell it, then it's a moot point about them trying to do something different. And when it comes to the other part that's behind the, I guess you'd call it that, the Craig Allen property, that right there, I mean, according to Mr. Allen, he's not going to be looking at to doing something anytime soon. And to say that it might be a viable project 5 years from now, it could be, and very easily, because we don't know what's going to happen in our town as far as how much more development that's going to or jobs that'll be created in Oak Ridge that's going to cause the need to accelerate or the need to change. So if that particular property there, because it's not surrounded with other residential property, and it is a viable parking garage type thing, that could be what Ron was talking about, a potential condominium site that could possibly have some commercial on the bottom side, and those condos could actually be commercial themselves. You look at some of the other developments that's in the Charlotte area and also in Nashville area, you see that exact same thing. It may be 2 stories, maybe 3 or 4, whatever it is, but it may not be all residential. It may be business condos instead of residential condos. So that is a vertical mixed use. What we've got right now that the developer can sell is a horizontal mixed use. So our focus has been, and we've approved this, has been this particular piece of property here. And we just need to some way make it to where everything works. And then if 5 years down the road, if Mr. Craig Allen can make something work, or whoever can make something work, if it's not him, it may be a partner of his or whatever, because he is the landowner. He could very well just be the landowner and have someone else that would do the building portion of it that could get it financed. And so I think we need to look at it in that respect. Mark's done a very good job here of laying this out for us and to give us our options. And I think we need to probably look at it from a sense point of view of what we can do now, what can be sold, what we could do later if the need arises, and also what we need to look at from a potential area that is surrounded with residential already. So that pretty well covers the 3 areas that's in the in that diagram, or the that Mark had there, as far as the town center area. And that's my comment.
This is Alderman Pinchuk again. From what I understand, Mr. Cullum had a lot more retail commercial space planned, and he has cut back considerably on that, again, because of probably the economy and what's going on in the country right now. And I think that's another reason why I think we've got too many apartments planned for this area. This thing could end up being just apartments and very little commercial as far as what he gets leased out. And that's a concern. I think we need to look at this very, very carefully.
I'll chime in. I agree with Mayor Williams. If the concern is that he's scaling back on the commercial right now, the density of those apartments is what feeds the commercial. So providing that residential aspect is what helps keep the commercial in that area viable. They kind of feed off of each other. I will also say that you have the office, the property that's owned office on the other side. Now, I don't know how much of that's developable. It looks like right now most of it's in flood zone, but that could very well be townhouses or condos. And there's no saying that someday down the line those apartments convert to condos, because that has happened. That happens all over the country, where apartments, especially nice apartments, someday convert to condos. But I'm fine with the number of units, and he's providing some very nice amenities. I think this is the centerpiece. To me, I envision this being the centerpiece of our community, and everything else kind of needs to work and complement it. Like I said before, I think the vast majority of the rest of this is probably going to be residential. Obviously, that's what it's zoned, the R2, all that middle property. And it's also tough. Some of that is tough topography. But there are options. There's opportunities in the Craig Allen property, and there's opportunities on the property on the other side of the Turkey Creek to provide for townhouses or condos. And certainly in developing that side, a bridge could be built over the Turkey Creek to access all of what's going on, but give you some separation from the main campus. So I think there's plenty of opportunities here to make sure that we're complementing what this initial project is bringing to us.
This is John Green. I guess I'm confused. It's my understanding that the Planning Commission approved the concept of the middle property development as presented to us on 2 or 3 occasions. And I thought I understood that the purpose of this meeting was not to rehash the middle property concept, but rather to look at the mixed-use town center concept for future projects. So it seems like we should be talking about mixed-use town center for future projects rather than rehashing the middle property.
I have to agree with that.
I'll add this in. I don't see how, at this point, I would love to see this piece, and I know we need to plan, and I've said we need to plan. I would love to see this piece come into existence, and I'm not in a hurry to see anything else develop. We do need to be clear that we don't want to see any more high density apartments at this point. We really do need to absorb this into our town and see how everything kind of falls out. I don't see how Craig Allen's property develops how he originally envisioned. I will say this just for you all to chew on. His concept plan, as far as I can tell, was approved in May of 2017. So if he wants to build that, he would have to come back. Mark, would he have to come back to the Planning Commission to get approval again? It's kind of out of its vesting. So I don't know what that means as far as that could be condos there, that could be townhomes. I don't know that we want more vertical, that height. These are all questions that one I'm kind of struggling.
Yeah, he would have to come back to the Planning Commission because it's expired as far as the vested property rights. So,
Louise, I think the key thing to remember though is that property has actually been rezoned to town center district. So he could come back legally and have the right to go vertical unless you were to somehow change the zoning in the town center district.
Well, that's what I'm wondering is at this point, because he's out of vesting rights, we could go in and change TCD, change the zoning requirements, we could change it into the form-based code that Mark was talking about. I'm sorry.
yeah, you can do that. Obviously, it would, we would need to have a conversation with him, I would think. And
I agree. And oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
I think, David makes a good point because regardless of his project, he did get the property rezoned, and maybe the town center zoning district needs to be revamped. That certainly is a possibility because it's structured toward a vertical town center building project development.
And the question is that supported in the town? Do we want to see any more of that? And that, I guess, is the crux of it. I know we have some freedoms, but I also know we have some responsibilities to the property owner. And I certainly wouldn't want to yank the rug out from underneath Craig Allen without having conversations with him. We are certainly able to have those conversations, but I just don't see how we're going to support 3 and 4 stories anywhere else. I guess I don't see it.
I do believe, the community obviously needs to weigh in at some point when we can on our mixed use town center, what it is now, what is their vision for it, what do they want it to achieve, and kind of give us some guidance and policymakers some guidance on what the community wants to see there. And we'll have like visual preferences, and because I think, to me, with the area outside of the project that we're looking at right now, it might be useful to look, just inventory buildings and forms that we like and we think would be appropriate for this part of the town. Then that can kind of establish your physical parameters with how you market that and bring it about at some point. We have a cap in the mixed use town center overlay building size of 25,000. That's a pretty big building. So, maybe we need to look at not be so concerned about the uses that might go in, but look at more, what is the finished product like if we were to look over to the property west of the town hall and we just had a perfect vision of what we would want it to look like over there, what kind of built environment would we want to see? And then that becomes kind of your foundation for, how you restructure the plan. Then the restructured plan would be the guide for making your changes to your ordinances that would help bring that about over time. But it has to be something that's doable. And, that can change. And, what's not marketable right now may be very marketable in 5-10 years. It's hard to know. And it may be that commercial, with all the online, options that are available out there, is just going to wither away more or less. And that could be a problem. It may be very difficult for Tom to fill up his commercial part of his development. I don't know. I mean, those are questions that nobody really knows the answer. But I think if you step back and you just kind of revisit your vision and, look at the areas in our town center, if this is where you all think the town center needs to be and stay, what do you want to see there? And, I think that's the way I would approach it. And that's the way I would present it in a public workshop with visual preferences, like we've done on some other areas of the town, to get a sense for what people like, what people dislike. And then that can help, with coming up with amendments that fit your community, and hopefully will provide for the sense of place that this mixed-use town center was originally created for. Because I really wouldn't personally want to see us lose the objective of what this was created to accomplish. But as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of ways to bring about a sense of place. Cherokee Boulevard doesn't have 4-story buildings, but it's a place. I go there, I'll drive 30 minutes to get there to go run. And, why do I do that? I mean, it's all the things that come together that make that a destination. It's not just me. So it's creating places like that, I think is really what we're trying to do in this part of the town, and maybe in other priority areas of our community.
I have some more comments. I think what I'm hearing in this discussion is some changes required to the mixed-use town center concept. But as I recall, the primary one right now was that we wanted to kind of limit the ability of a developer to put a 4-story apartment complex in somewhere. Seems like we ought to address that first. The second part is all this discussion we've just had about our vision and maybe getting the public back in to kind of get their concept on the vision, to redefine the long range vision for the mixed use town center. But I see that as 2 phases, I guess, of changes to the mixed use town center. I heard Louise I think it was the last we had, you were pretty to make sure that we didn't have any more 4-story apartment complexes. And I think we need to address that promptly in the mixed use town center text or wording, or however you want to do it. The big picture that Mark, that you just talked about, to get the vision that we want, seems like a little longer vision that we can deal with over the next several months or next year or so. That's my comments on what we've just been talking about.
Yeah,
Mayor
I think
Williams.
that's good. I agree.
Mayor Williams here. What John's saying is true. If you go back to when this was originally brought up with the public input, when you looked at the original bubble plan, it was for the Ford property, and they talked about vertical. We had buildings that could be no less than appearance-wise to be 2 stories, even though it may be 1 story, and we pretty well held true to that with existing buildings on the corners there at Campbell Station and Kingston Pike. But when you get to these here, we could not sell the vertical. We tried it with the trips to Las Vegas. We tried it with a trip to Nashville, and there was no bites. But we did have this bite that we've got now, and that we've approved. And so now it has changed. It changed from vertical to what we could get was horizontal. Now, in the future, it could be vertical, but we don't know. I mean, we didn't know back when we originally did this that we could not sell vertical. We thought vertical was the way to go. And it probably is still in places like Nashville and all, but in the suburbs here, and that's all urban, but in the suburbs here, you just don't, particularly in Farragut, you can't sell it. So we've got what we've got with this development. What John's saying is we need to look at the future. Now, when we had public opinion before, it was based on everybody wanting a town center. What I guess we need public opinion now of is what do we want to do after what we've got? In other words, what Louise said, this being the center, I have to agree with that. It is, or it will be, or it is, and it will be. But going forward, what do we want to do with the rest of it as far as developing it as a town center? That's the public input I think that we need and that we need to listen to. And so if whatever we do here with our ad hoc committee is will, I guess, lay the groundwork for the what we have now and what we'll look at in the future. So if we can move to that, I think we probably should.
Yeah, what John makes a good point, because he's right. The first issue is pretty easy to deal with, in my opinion. We only allow residential right now in the mixed-use town center if it's in the upper floors. That may through the market and be self-regulatory, because nobody's probably going to do that. Or we could completely take that option out and basically make the planned commercial development district, which is where the Biddle farm may be rezoned to that residential would be an option there. So that means that anybody that wanted to do higher density residential, that wasn't in a mixed use building, would have to go through a rezoning process to plan commercial development, which would probably be unlikely if nobody wanted to see more apartments outside of the Biddle project. So would be a pretty easy way. You could either just leave the language as it is because it's probably not marketable in the upper floors, or we could take it out of the C1 mixed use town center and not have residential as an option in there in the short term until we hear from the community and what they would be comfortable with. They may agree with that, may not have a problem with it, and then just have that as an option only in a planned commercial development overlay.
And then the only thing you would address really is in the, there's verbiage in the mixed use town center in the comprehensive land use plan that allows up to 15 units per acre.
Yeah.
So that would have to be addressed.
We'd have to address the plan itself in the short term, concurrent with that change to the ordinance, because the ordinance should reflect your plan.
Yeah.
So we could make a modification dealing with the substantial residential language in our current mixed use town center and, recommend that change be made in the short term, which honestly, I think most of the community, at least the ones I've heard from, would probably agree with that change. I don't think there's a whole lot of people that want multifamily throughout our mixed use town center, not from what I've heard. So that probably would be a relatively easy change until we can figure out a little bit more in-depth discussion what we really want to see on the remainder of our town center area.
I would
So
add one
the
thing
short
that
term,
I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I would add this thing. This is you hear this phrase "missing middle housing" thrown around a lot. I'm not sure what missing middle housing means to us, but certainly townhomes and brownstones and a walkable environment. Certainly, I'm thinking that there's areas within this town center where those are really prime opportunities to take advantage of. That people are looking for. Certainly, our retired people are looking for something that's not so much yard work, and they could walk to something. So obviously, those would need to be placed closer to where all the various commercial areas are. I know Ron had mentioned last time talking about possibly having neighborhood convenience or commercial on the other side of Campbell Station Road, beyond where that stream is, and maybe having a commercial pocket there. Obviously, if we're going to do this medium density housing, and you want to make it walkable, you want to make it walkable to something. So then you've got to start looking at what's a convenient walk. So I certainly don't want to forget about that.
I've got a question. For 6 years, we've been talking about the mixed-use town center, and that's been our vision, 4-story vertical. If we make any language changes to the mixed-use town center zoning, can we put in there that it has to be condominiums and not apartments? Is that possible?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what I would focus on is more of the form and not necessarily how the space is used, whether it's rented or owned. I'd focus more on the physical form of the building. So, for example, let's say you don't want a footprint area more than 7,000 square feet. So, because that would basically get rid of any, commercial scale multifamily projects. Those are going to be from 10 to 15,000 square foot footprints in most cases. So that would be what I would focus on. It's a little bit hard for us at the town level, to regulate how somebody, whether they lease or people buy a space or lease a space. It's not. I'm not personally concerned about that. I would be more concerned about the form of the building, the arrangement of the buildings, in relation to public spaces and your transportation system, and making sure that people can feel like they can conveniently get to a destination in different, forms of transportation within a 20-minute, let's say a 20-minute walk. That's probably what I would, if I was going to look at it, that's what I would focus on, is just looking at the building sizes for now, trying to regulate the form of those.
This is John Green. Ron Pinchuk, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying there's an appetite for condo rentals. Mark, could we at least insert some preferable wordage? Preferable that's condo availability, such as.
Yeah, I mean, we can put whatever language that you all want to recommend. I mean, we can do that. It's, I think it would be something that we would have trouble really administering at the town level, as to whether
that's why I'm suggesting that we don't try to govern it, but rather encourage it.
Yeah, I mean, we could reference it as what we're looking for or what that might mean.
And that puts it at the forefront, but it puts it visible on the table when we enter in discussions with prospective developers that this is what we'd like to see, if there is a market for it.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is a market for it. Ron, you say you've talked to people, but I don't know if that means there's a market for it.
True. People have said that they would love to move into a mixed-use town center development, but didn't want to rent. So I'm assuming they want to buy.
I know, but I don't know how many people represents
Good point. Good
two
point.
or 200. So it's back to the marketable. But I still think we could put some verbiage in there that keeps it in our minds when the discussions come up, that this is really what we'd like to remind us of. This is kind of what we'd like. And if there is a market for ownership, then that would be a good thing to do. Because as I've heard Louise say several times, ownership is one of the fundamentals that we've had in this town, mostly residential homes, but also I guess we could extend that to mean condominiums as well.
And I'll piggyback on that a little bit just by saying that I think it'd be easier to maybe state something like that in a land use document, that it's more aspirational of what you're wanting to see and wanting to feel like in the community, rather than in an ordinance that's telling people you have to have a condo versus you have to have apartments. And I want you to go back to what Mark talked about earlier about forms. So if you go to a big city and you walk down the street and they have a bunch of 20 or 30-story buildings, you don't know if those buildings are office, if they're resident, if they're condos, if they're apartments, they're owning or renting or anything like that. So it really does go back to the form that you want to see. So even if these 4-story apartments that may be built over on the Biddle property, whether they're rentals or whether they're condos, you're really not going to know. It's really just the look and feel of what you're looking for in your community. And that's, ultimately what you need to focus on first and foremost. And then we can try to encourage those other things like condo units in the future.
Yeah, again, that's the answer to the form question, and how we administer that. Then I would look to you guys as the professional, or not an urban specialist here. But I think what Ron is saying is that I think we would like to see ownership where possible, rather than, because I think it's more, maybe I'm wrong, it seems like it's more long-term, less turnover when you have condos rather than apartments. Maybe that's not true, but that would be my perception. But as far as how to administer it, David, I think you're on the money there. You folks can figure out what the best way to inject that into our long-range planning or our ordinances or wherever else it needs to go.
Again, the people I've talked to not only want to take ownership of the condo, but they want to take ownership of the concept of living, working, and playing in that type of environment. So that's what they're asking for. They want to live there, whether they're retiring or some young people that don't want a house and don't want to worry about maintenance, but they would love to live in that center of town and own. So I think, we keep looking at different type of housing, and there are a lot of people that would, young and retired, that would like to have a condo in the middle of town.
This is Valerie DeBow. When I see this piece of property, I get really excited over the possibilities of what we can do for our town on this. And I really fear that if we do the wrong thing, we just ruined a piece of property that really could have been a way to connect our community. And right there at the intersection of Campbell Station and Kingston Pike, we have all different kinds of things already established. We have our new community center, the senior center. We've got the shopping center. We've got Campbell Station Inn. And then across from that, we've got the Starbucks, some office spaces, I think a nail shop. A little farther down, the Civic Hall, across the street from that, fire hall, auto shops, and now the food truck place. Across from that, we've got the jewelers, we got Kroger's, and we got dentists, or I'm sorry, chiropractors, the school, veterinarian, and then we've got this empty space. I consider myself to be a very creative person, and when I see this space, I think that there's so much possibility. And when I was here in our meeting last time, I really felt that a 4-story apartment complex really was not the future of Farragut. And I think what people are yearning for is a heartbeat. I think when people say that they want a mixed-use town center, I think that's kind of like the catchphrase for all people to assume that's what they want. But I think being that we are a suburban, somewhat rural area, we're not in Knox City, what we're looking for is, in my opinion, is not necessarily a traditional mixed-use town center where we see something like Lenore City's downtown area, or what Knox County, the downtown has, or what North Shore Town Center has. I think that that is going to look out of place. And I would like to suggest that we focus more on something that is more quaint, something that is more artistic and cultural, something that would bring the community and connect our community to this place where we can appreciate the natural environment of that land. Because I do believe there's like a half an acre of a pond. I'm not sure. Is that right?
Valerie, what property are you talking about? The Biddle property or the other undeveloped property?
On the where I thought the apartments were supposed to be, on across from Kroger's.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we reverse our decision on the approval of that as planned? We've already approved that in the Planning Commission.
Yep.
Of approval so that they could move forward with their plans. And I think what I'm hearing you saying is we should reverse that decision.
Actually, yes, because I think when you're talking,
I'm not in favor of that at all.
okay.
Same here. Valerie, we're past that point. What we're looking at now is the other properties and how a town center should be looked at going forward past where we're at. And that's, the actual citizens of our town told us what they wanted, and we went after it. And again, you have to get what a developer will give you. You can wish in one hand and hope in the other and get nothing. And that's kind of what we did before until Bud Cullum come along with this particular project right here. So if we want to sit back and wait for something like what you're talking about to come about, we've been waiting for that for quite some time, and it's just not happened.
Okay, well, so you're suggesting that where the roundabout is, that right behind at the Kroger Center, right behind that, that's all like 7 buildings of apartments. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. That's what the Planning Commission approved already. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then from the Kroger building of what's there presently, the old Kroger building, forward to Kingston Pike, that's the retail space. So about 2/3 of it is apartments. So all that is approved still, because I thought that they're just listening, I thought that that was kind of still up in the air.
No, ma'am.
Valerie, this is David. The concept plan has been approved by the Planning Commission, so that gives the developer rights. They have vested rights now in moving forward on that project. Now, if they don't move forward in the next 3 or 4 years, then that would go away. But for right now, they have the right to go and try to get everything approved based on that concept plan. And so that's probably that's what they've been working on, and that's what they'll continue to work on. So certainly there could be tweaks to that plan, but probably not major changes from what has been shown so far.
So the form and all the talk that's been previously today is in regards to other parcels of property. It's not
Yep, and you need to
specific.
think about it in terms of all the other properties in that kind of the purple area and the brown area that's on the screen right now. Those types of areas, and what would you like to see the rest of the town from this Biddle farm? What else would you like to see the rest of that develop and look like in the future?
So
Yeah, I think, Valerie, one thing that we're trying to revisit here is one of the questions is in our current text of the mixed use town center, that's the thing. It talks about having the kind of apartment project that Bud Cullum's proposing. It talks about having high density residential, to support the mixed use town center. And that's one of the things that we're concerned about in the future. And that's why we're trying to look at that language and, look at the remaining parts of the mixed use town center and what kind of establish maybe a new form or a new language to direct that form that would be maybe more in line with what you're thinking. But that's the thing. Right now in the mixed use town center text, it talks about having substantial residential, and it says primarily multifamily residences. I mean, so he's following the text of our language, that we have adopted right now in our plan. And that's one of the things that we're trying to revisit and look at. Do we want to see more of that in the purple area, basically, in the
Okay.
future?
I'm sorry. For some reason, what I gathered, what I was hearing was that when I heard Louise say like no more 4-story apartment buildings, I thought somehow that was nixed from this Biddle across from Kroger's. So
No, what I was indicating is that, yes, this is part of the plan. Apartments were always envisioned to be part of the town center.
exactly.
That's always been my understanding, and that's always what we've worked off of. But as I look at it, with getting this, it was always envisioned to be on the Ford property as well. So they've moved it over to the town, to the Biddle property, and they've proposed this, and we've approved this concept plan. And my indication is that I think this is good, and this is a good centerpiece. But everything else that needs to feed out from it, everything that we go from here, needs to be more about home ownership, more about single family attached and single family detached small lots, and more of that more residential, but in a urban context, in that it's walkable, that it's engages with the street, that there are destinations, like Mark said. That's something we've got to really kind of pinpoint. Okay, if we want this all to be walkable, where are the destinations? Obviously, the commercial in the front of Ford property is a destination. Is there another destination that we can point out on the Biddle, the other side of the Biddle property, on the other side of Campbell Station Road? How do we do what you just said, quaint? How do we work through this and make this still a place people want to live? To me, this is a very tricky thing, and it's a very important thing. I guess that's why I'm really struggling for the rest of this, is because we finally have the centerpiece. How do we go from there and not muck up our town center? So I guess that's what I've been saying.
Valerie, this is the mayor again.
Hello.
Something that we're not sure of is that when you go down to the Renaissance, and then you see the Swan property there, and some of the other properties along Kingston Pike, as you get to Watt Road, and in that whole area right there, we're not for sure, but that may end up being the artsy area, because it's really, I mean, you'd like to see it in your town center, but if it don't happen there, then I kind of look at what's going on in the more westerly portion of our town, and I see that has a higher possibility, because you've already got some of it there, and with the Renaissance and with the Framery area there, and a couple of the small restaurants, that may end up being where we have it at. We may not have it in the town center at all. I mean, you can hope for it, but if the developers can't sell it, then you kind of have to go where it will sell, and that area may end up being where we have what you're talking about, and which to me would be great too. I mean, or I always thought it would be.
So the Craig Allen, the property that's right behind the fire station and between Village Veterinarian, what keeps that from being an apartment complex tucked back in there?
That's what
Well, it's required to be a vertical mixed use in that zoning district. So he couldn't build just a multifamily product back there, because that's a requirement in his zoning district, the town center district.
Okay.
It's a little different.
This is
not
Ron.
a such a zoning
Hi, Ron.
district.
Yeah, Craig Allen came to us about 3 years ago with a concept plan for 4 buildings that had underground parking, commercial on the first floor, offices on the second, and apartments or condos on the third and fourth floor. So the plan was approved, but he was trying to get financing. Well, actually, he has the finance. He was trying to get someone to partner with him to do that development, and the people that in Nashville that he was hoping to work with, just would not budge out of that market because things were going so well over there. So that's why he has not gone forward with this project at this point in time. But it was 4 buildings with a mixed-use town center plan.
One thing on well, just a quick thing on Biddle's development. Honestly, I believe, and just in my opinion, it's nothing scientific, but without the multifamily part of Bud Cullum's project, I think his ability to finish the commercial part would take a lot longer, probably, and to get that, it might be a smaller portion than we maybe originally envisioned, but to get that built, I think it really will be boosted by having the multifamily that close, because those people could conveniently walk to support whatever goes in that commercial node there along that main street. So in the context of his project, and it's not abutting any existing residential properties, I think it's important to have that kind of higher density probably in that context to support what he's planning to do in the non-residential part.
I agree. There should be some residential there. I guess my vision of what I could see the potential of that property is if you were to, I don't know what economically, how other businesses are looking for properties here to rent out in Farragut as far as tech. There's a lot of cutting edge industries such as the digital media, biosciences, arts-based businesses, things like that. I don't know what kind of stuff that we need here in Farragut, but I know that that's a sector of offices that are not probably, being serviced here in Farragut. That would also bring in a lot of millennials, and the millennials, I think over there by Kroger, if you had office space and residential and, daycare, small shops where you have artisans and stuff, who can display and put in their stuff, and, a nice streetscape. I just think that is something that would be, our future as opposed to apartments, but that's just my opinion.
Valerie, on your point about artisans, that's one of the things I've been thinking about proposing for the Campbell Station Inn, because we struggled to understand what we could do there. And if we could get some artists in there, have some studio space, obviously we'd really have to think about what type of artists we'd like in there, because we don't want our building to get burnt down. But there could also be an opportunity to bring people in there. They could have a space on that main floor for selling. It would really be an opportunity to kind of shine that Farragut is not just high-tech people. It's also, we have a big artist community in the area, and that could be an opportunity for that building, which just ties into what we have going down in our town center altogether. So I hear what you're saying. This to me, that residential aspect in that density is needed to establish a walkable, people actually walking in the area. Once we start seeing that pedestrian activity there, that's going to make a big difference in the feel of our community. When you see people walking over to the new pub, when you see people walking across the street to we always see students already doing that to the Starbucks. When you see people actually walking, it has a major impact on how people drive, because they're seeing people and okay, they kind of slow down, they watch people walking. But that pedestrian activity is so vital to our town center, and this kicks it off well, which is why I'm very supportive of the apartments there, but have also indicated that I don't want to really see any more. I think it will serve the purpose multi-purposes, in that it provides a place, a group of density of people there already that are shopping, but this project also provides the public with access to that waterway, that access to that big open space that we will use as a community gathering space, and you have a community already there. So that will feed off itself and start attracting, I think, other housing development that we want to see in the area. So I'm really excited, tentatively excited. I really want us to, I really want to see the rest of that town center develop in a very, in a way that gives us long lasting suitability and a relativity where people want to be. So that's kind of where I'm kind of coming from.
This is Ron again. I'd like to make the point. I've been, from the day I first saw this concept plan, I've been excited about it. And every time we've made a suggestion to Bud, he's come through with something even better. So, I was very disappointed. It's not truly a mixed-use town center in the fact that it's not vertical, but everything that we've asked for, widening the sidewalks, making the fountain into a green area so people could mingle and gather there. All of those have been very positive. The only thing that concerns me is, one, I didn't expect it to be 280 apartments, and I wanted some type of a condo of some type. And so my only concern about this project is I'd like to see the number of apartments reduced to maybe 220. 220 seems to be the magic number. If you're going to build apartments, you have to have at least 220. And I'd like to see those other 60 apartments turned into condos. And I would like to go to Bud and say, could you convert one of those buildings to condos? Is that possible? But otherwise, I'm all for the project. And Valerie, if you haven't seen a concept plan of this, you need to see it. And also there are some visuals of streetscapes and so forth that really make it appealing. And I think you'd be very pleased when you saw that. So maybe you could get that from Mark.
Sure.
So, yeah, let me just kind of, I guess, recap where the original goals and just propose a path forward based on what we've talked about today. I would propose that I will go in and look at the text of our current mixed-use town center and address the high-density residential, substantial residential language and present some proposed modifications to that. We still need to have some reference to it, but it might be limited higher density residential so that it would still accommodate this project, but it wouldn't really be a predominant focus of the mixed-use town center. And then, if we're okay with making those short-term changes to the mixed-use town center land use, then that could be, coincidental with changes that we're going to have to make to the zoning ordinance, both for the Biddles project for the planned commercial development district, if that's the direction the Planning Commission wants to go. And then we can also address residential as it would apply to the mixed-use town center overlay in those base zoning districts. So whether we want to keep it in there basically as it is, where it's only an option if it's in the upper floors, and maybe, by market that is basically not going to happen, at least in the short term, or just take it out altogether and have it only as an option in the planned commercial area where it has the mixed-use town center overlay for the short term. And then the longer term would be what, on the rest of the mixed-use town center area, what does the community want to see? I'd focus on the form, the transportation system, how do we create the sense of place that this land use area was originally created for, and being kind of pragmatic and revisiting maybe the original vertical mixed use concept and thinking of ways to create that sense of place in with other products, perhaps. So that's what I would propose at this time. I don't know how you all feel about it. It's kind of like John Green made a good point there. There's a short-term fix or kind of a Band-Aid approach, and then there's the bigger issues that will take a little bit longer and require community engagement. And who knows when we'll be able to really do that in the kind of format that we really need to do it in, because we need to use visual preferences and have people focus on the look that they're after, what they want to see this area look like if they were to leave and come back in 20 years. We'll kind of look across that field west of the town hall and what would you want to see, and those kind of things. So I don't know how you all feel about that, but that's what I would propose at this point.
Mark, I would, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm going to say real quick, I would support taking it out of commercial and putting it in PCD for high density housing. And I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, I agree too. The mayor, I agree. Then we can work on long term with the citizens on what they want to see with the overall, as would have what we have.
Now, does everybody else see that as a good direction at this point?
This Alderman Pitchock, I'm fine with that.
I'm good with that.
Hey, this is Trevor. I would just, as kind of maybe homework for people to think about going forward to those public meetings and, next stages of kind of fleshing out what we envision. Our current strategic plan in the critical success factor that's labeled, creating a retail and service destination. We've got two pieces in there that might be important to just flesh out a little bit more. And those two are, we have vibrant commercial centers and we have neighborhood activity hubs. If each of us would maybe think about what that means, what it looks like to have a vibrant commercial center and neighborhood activity hubs, I think those two pieces might help us decide, well, what do we really want it to look like on the properties that we have remaining to be developed for this, for town center areas.
Trevor, I think that's a great idea, because back to the areas that, such as the Renaissance area, that's an area that will develop differently. And but one person we've not heard from, and that's Scott Russ.
Yeah, hi, good everybody. I've been kind of quiet today. I'm just absorbing all of this, but some of the things that I thought early on while reviewing it too have been brought up by Vice Mayor, by Mayor John Green, everybody. Just hit on some of those. But Mark, I think the theme here that I'm seeing, and I 100% agree with it, is that the primary focus should be on the form, because I think the development and the use will follow the form. I mean, that just occurs naturally in this world in most cases. And I think where we're located at, that will continue to occur. One thing too that you had mentioned, Mark, too, is would we want to keep the keep the vertical element in the mixed use town center as well as have that horizontal, because like you said, if Craig Allen initially proposed a conceptual plan for vertical, and we've heard from the developers, we've heard from the mayor that there's really no demand for that right now. You can't sell it. But if there, don't shut the door on it, because in 5 years or 10 years, there may be some demand for that. I would certainly want to, keep that element in there. And one other thing too is I know that, I don't want to get out in the weeds back on the Biddle property, because that's not the purpose of this. But when we talk about density, And, I think I heard Ron say he would like to see 220. That's the magic number. But yeah, it seems like an arbitrary number. And what dictates what is the proper density? Is it how I feel feeling about it, or what kind of metrics are behind, what is the proper density for a development? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'd be, definitely willing and would like to have any kind of input on that.
Yeah, good point, Scott. We really didn't have a number when we looked at the overlook, and that ended up being a very nice development, and I think they've still got a building or two to finish up there in the very, very back. I was up there today just to drive around and look. Now that they've got the street cleaned up, and there's not a whole lot of nails out there to stick into your tires. But anyway, it looks like that has ended up being a very nice development, and it's you look at the stormwater on it, and it seems to be designed to work the way that, or it's working the way that they designed it. And you kind of, when we were first looking at that, we did not really have a good number as far as how many our town would support apartment wise, and because of everything else that was being built around us. But this being so much different because it's right in town, where people can walk. That's not really what you would call a walkable community because there's nothing really to walk to. So anyway, I think Mark's got a good idea of what to do there. I think we're pretty much in agreement with it, and let's go with what we got, and let's see what and when we can get this out to the public on the rest of it and see what they think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Did you happen to spot a dog park while you were up there? You need a magnifying glass to find it.
No, I saw an area that it looked like it might be one in the future, but because it was not really laid out for a building. I think that is something that's going to be discussed anyway.
Yeah, it's very rough in the early stages of production, as you can tell out there. In fact, their plan said it's not exact. I think they're just going to have to, when they get permission to start, figure out with the town staff and where it makes the most sense to put it, and because they've still got some grading around that area to finish up.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to go out there in the weeds on that. But anyway, yeah, that's my point, Mark. I think you're definitely on the right track.
Okay, well, does anybody else have anything for today's meeting?
Mark, just to make a note of it, we do have a roughed-in grid pattern that we show on our comprehensive plan map. So that certainly indicates to anyone that's coming along that that's kind of what we're looking for is that grid-like pattern on the Ford property. So that holds that in place until we can kind of get a better idea of what it is we're looking for as far as residential and what we want to do with that. So I just wanted to make that note.
Okay, and most of the language in the current town center, I wouldn't propose to change because it probably is what we would want. It's just the references to higher density residential. I just need to revisit that a little bit and scale that back somewhat, and let you all take a look at it, and then we'll just kind of go from there, because there's going to be some changes that will come to the Planning Commission in the next couple of months dealing with certainly the planned commercial development district, if that's the option that the developers go with. And we'll, obviously address these low-hanging fruit changes to the mixed-use town center at that time too.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Mark.
All right, that's it for today then. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks a lot. Okay.